All right, so now that we have 4 minutes left, I'm going to speed up. It's going to be a fast one, because we're always worried about what's next. What's next with technology? What's next on the horizon? What's going to happen in higher ed next? Well, so you saw some people exit, because what do they have? A fear of missing out. Constantly we ask about the technologies and what we should do next and where we should go, and I saw FOMO on the back channel already. Am I there? I wish I was. Well, you know what? We need to ask these things because a year ago, we've been asked to react. And we've got tools making decisions for us in Silicon Valley that we aren't making decisions ourselves, but we're repurposing them for education. What is this reaction doing? I don't know, but I think we have to mix it up. The algorithms we choose in our reactions, in our spaces, and what we use online is impacting who we are as professionals, and that ripples down to our students. So I'm with Ben. You should randomize our next things and get angry and change up your feeds. I think we don't ask about privacy and the affordances it has for our students, ourselves, faculty, and staff in these spaces, and we need to start talking about that more. Where's your data go? What does it do? I've told someone before, and I've told a few of you, Black Mirror scares me. It's a show about reality and human technology, and we're getting there. We don't always look at the terms of service. We don't know where data is going and where that will go and be put on. So I have some concerns we need to talk about first. So I'm not going to talk about technology. I refuse to, because we're going too fast. We need to step back, and we need to look at a few things before we go forward. I'm going to use a different 4-letter word, and I'm going to pluralize it. That's. We always put these tools before what we do, which should be pedagogy, planning, and looking at the challenges we need to face. So if you put the tools before the pedagogy, I think you could also be labeling yourself as so. I think we need to study problems. A wise supervisor, mentor, and colleague, George Velliciano, said, we need to study problems, not the things, not the shiny objects. We need to go and look at design thinking, maybe not like the D school, because it's a little bit complicated when we're thinking about prototyping. So I borrowed Guido's remix, and I kind of got some ideas about how higher ed could think about the process and before we jump to the tech itself. So I'm going to share with you, the first thing we need to do is start learning. Learning ourselves for our students, right? So this infinity of ongoing assessment we do research, we repurpose, we design. We do it for our students to persist and graduate, and we think about it in different ways. We think about digital fluency, information literacy, let's get rid of fake news, because it's impacting us as a society. Sure, I want to hear about my student's story, and I want them to use the bat signal of the hashtag, but are there challenges with them being in spaces? And that's something I hadn't thought about a few years ago. And I am thinking about it now, because we can now find them, search them, look for them. I have their permission, sure, to share this, but what does this impact as they look at the market of jobs, who they are, and who they're putting themselves online? I think we also have to ask the same question about other stakeholders on campus. We talk about students a lot here, but if we don't talk about ourselves and what we don't know and how we're using it, what is our presence online being? How we're using these applications? Hey, I'm not ready to be chipped before I have a few more questions to answer. Connected learning needs to happen at our campuses, and connected learning will be from all of us. We need to come together as a community. Milton Cox talks about faculty learning communities. I think we need to have learning communities that center around problems, peer-to-peer assessment, peer-to-peer learning, and sharing. And they might be even having a laugh. Do we have that on our college campuses, or do we have different divisions? I think about creating as the next phase. We have a lot of creators in this room, and very creative ones in that. Lots of great ideas are out there, and there's no shortage of you online and in spaces. So as I read on my shelf of different things about your identity, how we're developing as professionals and practitioners and faculty, I'm thinking about issues that come out from public shaming to virtual selves to trolling to cyberbullying. We are part of this as well, and we have to admit that first. Think about your digital spaces where you're a visitor or a resident. A visitor might be, I go log on my bank accounts and I leave very little traces. But where do you live online when you're not online? What do you leave behind that others can find out about you? And what does that mean if they go into the wrong hands or they're misinterpreted or misrepresented? We have lots of digital water coolers for learning and support, right? You probably have them now. We always wave them up. And in our network communities, our individual professional self and the communities are being challenged. So one of them I think of that's really great, and I shout out to my colleague Kristen Abel, is thinking about stigma and mental health. How can one movement move forward to something great? Well, a power of the community does it. We look at the committed projects and where they are and what they're doing to think about mental health in higher ed for us, because that's only going to ripple down to our students as well. I think about the collaborative learning communities and the challenges on my own campus where we said, hey, transfer male students aren't making the cut. Why aren't we bringing around a table of people, students, staff, and faculty, to talk about this issue and address it and have a summit and look at what's the evidence, what are the practices, and how can we do this better? I think we have the capacity to do this, and our campuses need to brainstorm and not outsource this. We are not all experts, and you shouldn't claim that you are one, because you probably aren't. We need to think about ways that we can have discussions that move forward into action. So I think what most of the speakers have talked about today represent what a few things you can do. Sure, I could give someone a Google Doc, and many of you start chipping in, chiming in. We do great things, and we do ridiculous things like create bingo cards for tech conferences we're making fun of. I think about ways that we could come up with solutions. So proposing a challenge at a conference and coming up with a solution would be a really neat way to go. And at the Online Learning Consortium, we did that. They wanted to bring tech vendors in. We said, why don't we actually partner with a problem and have librarians, students, faculty, staff, IT, as well as our campus providers. I think about a course. Why have a textbook when we could be curating the knowledge that's out there, looking and developing that critical lens and information literacy skill, and developing a wiki that supports the course guideline that would be free and vetted by peer review by the peers in the class. I think about also cool things that are happening in the podcasting realm and many videos on YouTube. You're creating a wealth of knowledge and training. And Bonnie's an example. She has a Slack back channel. Although she podcasts out loud and interviews colleagues that are teaching and faculty and staff, she also has a back channel where people have dialogues that are private and considerate and fluid and sharing. Building these ideas and prototyping would be the next way to go as we go forward. We talk about a few communities. I like Wenger's communities of practice, so you don't have to get too theoretical here. We'll just go to innovation. That center part of what we do in our world changes what we think about each functional area in higher ed and our role. I hope it does, because it has for me one example. So my example of a domain might be a space that you're online right now, and you're aggregating power, but you're getting knowledge that's contributing from a community, and it goes back into practice. So let's give an example so you could tie that onto something. When you put a hashtag on something, and we've seen a few shared, and there are no shortages of them now, they actually are aggregating ideas, thoughts, learning, and the way we're thinking about how we work. In higher ed, I think this hashtag has power to transcend boundaries and not just be at a conference or in a specific domain. I think about community that have led active ideas and powers and have moved research forward. One of those communities is here, and some of them are here now. They're advisors. I used to be an academic advisor for a long time, and that just means we support students. We get too caught up in our roles, and we don't think about how this helping actually could also help what you do in orientation or you support in residence life. So I think about a chat that's developed, and colleagues and I are looking at those topics to say, they've got some knowledge they're sharing, and this is not alternative professional development. Sharing. We share at these conferences, which is the testing, right? Or I call it the show and tell. How often do we share stories that don't always work? Probably not a lot. I haven't heard anyone talk about what they haven't worked on, so I'll talk about one. 10 years ago at University of Toronto, we decided that we wanted to connect to our students before they came to campus, build a rapport, and get them oriented. So essentially, I wanted them to ask better questions instead of what I would do with my life, what my classes are. We wanted to ask them and have conversations about how can I build who I am now and drive the bus when you leave. So before, a long time ago, let me tell you a story. There was a Facebook without pages, without groups, without anything. So we created a character named Ace, the academic and career explorer, creative. And his little icon there, you can see, spells it. We tried a whole bunch of tools and resources, and we looked to blogs, we did images and photos. But really, I want to admit that was an epic fail. Not all of that works. But what did work was us working with faculty and students on this project and understanding the peer delivery and the peer support network that could move this forward. So where are they now, and what are they doing? Well, there's still a blog, and it's student-led. And it's really cool to kind of follow their legend. There wasn't Twitter. We didn't have a Twitter, so they've added that. There being meaningful content and meaningful interactions and a dialogue between students, because that's where the power was within that project. I also think in higher ed, we don't share enough openly, and so I talk about y'all at other spaces, and I think we need to be better at what we do in this. So I think about open educational resources. K-12 does it really well. We could do it better, higher ed. Open educational practices, like my colleague Catherine Cronin at Galway, says, why aren't we sharing things in a better way? Why don't we share when we do really well or fail? Or beyond this session, where do our conference presentations and ideas go? Martin Weller is another character of mine over from the UK that talks about higher ed being accessible and open, but is it? Because openness is not necessarily a victory. Digital scholar is great, but I'd like to see a digital practitioner as a guide for all of you to know how to share better and more effectively and what it means to live digitally in these lives online. So let's think about sharing ourselves in the Creative Commons. I tweeted out my presentation slide deck. You can use it. It is there. It is free for you to use because we're only building on the ideas of others and giving licensing for that. I think about sharing my data and my research and my findings for practitioners. So as a scholar, you're not going to read my journal article. But if I told you this data set on Figshare has 250 social media policies, practices, guidelines, you're like, oh, let me Google that now. And we're also going to think about ways we can do things with survey data, maybe raw research you clean, or share the implications in a short video. So my colleagues at the Digital Learning and Social Media Group, we said, let's do a YouTube channel that shares research in plain English. So short videos that say the so what about what we do in research. But what does it mean for practice? Practitioners, we need to do the same thing. What works, what didn't, and how can we do better? This was the higher ed technology plan from the government. We'll see how this goes. But in the US, I think we need to think about how we're doing infrastructure, productivity, assessment, and how we work, both teaching, learning, inside and outside the classroom. And we need to have a voice towards that plan. And I'd like to see more practitioners at the table. I think we live in sandboxes, and then we also don't escape them often enough. You don't need to know all these professional orgs, but they've started to learn about you because, like me, others of you are going to them, and we're cross-sectioning what we do and what we share and how we work. So I think librarians need to be at the table, instructional designers, CIOs, technologists, informatics, and talent and development folks need to know more about you. So how can we solve the opportunity and problems? It's probably come together and thinking about the issue itself. We don't need the shiny object, because I think we need to drop that. We need to think about how we're going about things, because we are all designers. And in that, you're designing ways to shape your world and what you do. So keep a look at the problems and the challenges. Study those, go through the process of design, and then rinse and repeat. Thank you.